Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start off with Marie's bio before, Rita lets everybody else in. Marie, thank you so much for joining us and for writing such a profound book. I know that it really resonated with a lot of our members. We saw all the reviews and we get all the star ratings from all the chapters, and it was really, really well received. So,
Oh, I'm
um,
glad.
we really appreciate your time and obviously your skill. Marie, I'm going to say your last name, Bostwick, is a New York Times and USA Today bestseller of more than 20 works of contemporary and historical fiction. We definitely need to hear more about that. Uh, and then I lost that. Marie lives in Washington State with her Brad. I'm assuming that's your partner or
My husband.
your husband, yes. And their moderately spoiled Cavalier King Charles
Yeah.
Spaniel. When not writing, she enjoys reading, cooking, every fiber craft imaginable, and spending time with family and friends. Marie travels extensively, speaking at libraries, bookstores, clubs, and community events. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody who's on the call today. We've got some interesting places: Toronto, Orlando, Florida, San Francisco, Lexington, Kentucky, Saskatoon, another Saskatoon, Ottawa, Toronto, and I am calling from Indonesia. Just to really throw a wrench in
So
things.
great. It's fun.
All right. So we have lots of questions, but as always, if you have a question for the author, you're welcome to put that into the chat window, but you're also welcome to ask it live. There's a raise your hand functionality on here, and Rita will tell us how to use it if anybody can't figure it out. It's not popping out at me right this minute. So
It's
Rita,
at
how
the
do you use
bottom
it?
of your screen, or in some cases under your reactions.
Okay. So if you would like to ask live, we love that. If you have any questions from the book or just from in general about being an author or writing 20 books, whatever it may be. Otherwise, I will kick off with all my questions. And they're going to be specific to the book that we read this month, which was the book club for Troublesome Women, which obviously resonated with us because we're a book club. Okay, so sorry, Marie, did you want to say something in terms of an intro, or are you good for me to just go right
No,
into it?
let's just go. Let's just go. I am over the sound of, I like I'm not that interested in hearing myself talk anymore. So I want to know what you guys.
Um, so I would like to know what the spark behind the book club for Troublesome Women was. I did read the author note, so I know that it's a book that you hold very close to your heart. And did the characters of the concept of Troublesome Book Club come to you first? Which came first?
I'm sorry, did the characters or the concept, did you say?
Yeah, was it the concept, or did you really have these like characters that you just needed to get out onto the page?
It was the concept.
Mhm.
So this all came about because I am fortunate to have my mom still with me. My mom is 92 years old, and 3 years ago we were talking, and my mom is amazing. She's kind of a force of nature, really. And among her many things that she is involved in is she's an avid reader. So we were talking about books one day, and The Feminine Mystique came up in our conversation. And she said, I don't know if I ever told you, but that book changed my life. And I said, you have not told me. I'd like to hear more. And so she started talking, and really within just like seconds of her beginning to speak, I got that kind of fabulous tingle all over feeling that writers get when you think, oh my gosh, I have just stumbled upon an idea that could be a really great book. And so that's really where the idea came from, was just, because as you guys are avid readers, you probably can point to books that changed your life. And I love that because I believe that books change lives. I believe books save lives. Um, and so the idea that this was the one that did something amazing for my mom was very appealing. But I will say the characters are not my mom, even though I named Margaret in homage to my mom. Um, they live very different lives. So the characters are really sprung from my imagination, but I didn't get to them until I started researching more. I had not read The Feminine Mystique, and now I've read it like 6 times. Um, and so, and then I started to read books about the feminine mystique and what the reaction was and how people felt about it. And so from there, from the basis of my research, that's how I started thinking of the characters. But it was also really important where I placed them, because where they live, it really impacts the story in such a big way.
Now, you didn't know your mom had read this book and that there was indeed a book that had changed her life, but did you have like a good handle on her life when she was a young woman and having children?
I would say to some degree, probably a better handle than my kids have on my life when I was a young woman. Uh, so, so to some degree, my mom was divorced and I knew there were reasons for that, but and I knew that she had friends that had sort of been with her in this period of time when she was like making a major change that would affect not only her, but our whole family. But I really didn't know that in some sense, like opening that book was a real catalyst for her to look at her life and say, is this the life I should be living?
Mhm. You spoke of the town, and the name of the town escapes me at this moment.
Concordia.
And it's like its own character in the book. You
Yep.
said it was really important to the way that the book was written. Can you explain further on that?
Well, first of all, so any of you who, took or forgot your high school Latin, may know that that concordia is a word that sort of means, it can mean finding accord or another sense of having peace or harmony because we are in agreement. And so this brings
Mm,
peace and theoretically happiness. So the idea that we're in this very planned community where there are so many rules and the implicit idea is like if everybody just follows the rules, there will be concord and harmony and peace and we will all be happy. So is that true?
mhm,
you know, and I thought it was such a terrific metaphor for the times when women are being told there's one way to be a woman. And if you do that, you're going to be fulfilled and it's going to be awesome. And the thing is, for some people it was, but for a whole lot of people it wasn't. And as I did more research and diving into that, I realized that there was for many women before they sort of found this book in particular, once they found it, it was like a light bulb went on for them. But before that time, they were just quietly and anonymously sort of suffering and saying, I have all the things that theoretically are supposed to make
mhm,
me happy, and I'm not. So what's wrong with me? And that was something that when I read real accounts from real women who had read that book at that time, like that is what they had been feeling before. Like, gosh, I am flawed in some way. I am either ungrateful for what I have, or there's just flat something off about me. And they didn't talk to each other about that by and large. So they were suffering and they were suffering alone.
mhm,
And reading The Feminine Mystique for people like my mom was like, it's not just me. So
mhm,
in modern parlance, we would say that these women felt seen, which is a really good feeling. But my mom told me very much, she says, I closed that last page and I thought, oh my God, there's going to be a revolution. And there kind of was, but I think much slower revolution, an ongoing revolution, than my mother thought. But I mean, I think she thought women were going to parade down the street with pitchforks and torches, and
mhm.
it wasn't quite that, but it was a sea change.
Now, I just wonder because a lot of the women actually bought the book. You can get a copy of it, um, The Feminine Mystique, and they brought it to their book club, and so we saw lots of pictures of that, which was nice. But what was accessibility like for that book at the
Oh,
time?
it was a big hit.
Mm.
So yes, it would have been something that people were reading and talking about, and Betty Friedan was getting a lot of press, positive and negative. And all press is good press, right? So it was making a lot of noise for sure. And it would have been something, I am curious, did libraries all carry it?
Mm.
That I do
Yeah.
not know the answer to. And I have got some thoughts about that, as why it may, but I have no factual evidence behind that. But I have thoughts that, maybe some didn't. Um, so yeah, it would have been it was a very popular book in the day. It sold a lot of copies, a lot of copies. And I'm thrilled that some of you brought it to your book clubs. I actually just learned of a bookstore in where is this place? Oh, it's Rochester, Michigan. I'm used to Rochester, New York, so I keep getting confused. Where they did a book club pairing where they're going to read both books.
Smart.
And they'll only have 10 people in these live book clubs. And so they sold out the first one and the second one and the third one and they are doing 4 book clubs. So there's in this town, and they're all reading both books, which I thought
That's
was awesome.
amazing.
And I've been in communication with the bookstore, and she said, I just am thrilled by this, that many of the people registering to partake in this book club are mother-daughter
Wow,
combinations.
that's awesome.
I think it'll be fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering because there's like a system in place to obviously keep women in their role. And so this woman publishes this book. And first of all, I think it was kind of like a coup that she even got it published by like a big publisher, and then that it went on to do as well as it did, because there's obviously like the patriarch is like pursuing this system of like, anyways, I would go on my soapbox. But anyways, next question. The word troublesome has a playful but rebellious ring to it. Why did you
Mhm.
choose it, and what does it mean in the context of this story?
Well, it's interesting because the title is not what the original title was. The original title was the Betty Friedan Book Club. And I really liked that title a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and my publishing house were like, we're concerned, and they weren't wrong. They said, we're concerned that a lot of people just don't know who Betty Friedan is, and so
Mhm.
this is not going to ring for them. And I was like, nonsense, of course, everyone. Well, I was wrong about that. So they actually, because if you recall from the very first thing I wrote in this book, and this was all there from, when I turned in my manuscript, it says on February 19th, 1963, a troublesome, imperfect, controversial woman named Betty Friedan published a troublesome, imperfect, controversial book titled The Feminine Mystique. The book didn't solve the problem, but it did put a name to it, shining a light that helped women who felt isolated and powerless to find one another and their voices. That has been the start of every revolution. So I had written that for a couple of reasons. Because I was aware that The Feminine Mystique, in some sense, is a book that has not necessarily aged perfectly well. And that even in the Times, it had, it had some problems. And then later on, especially, people were like, well, okay, but she really wrote about this very narrow group of pretty much white, college educated, middle class and upper middle class women, which is true. So I wanted to just kind of deal with some of that right up front, because I wanted to say, yes, I know, and that's what this is. Nonetheless, it's a snapshot in time, and it was a catalyst for other things that came. So I wanted to make everybody aware that's like, I know the imperfections of this book. Um, so talking about it being imperfect and controversial, but troublesome. And that was a lot of the reaction. I didn't like words like radical, because I think that is just like this, mean, angry women, right? That's always the idea about feminism. They're just angry, angry women. And yeah, she was kind of angry, but mostly she just wanted to change things. And I think that my characters they're not, I mean, they're kind of angry, but they're not, again, they're not marching down the street with pitchforks and torches. They just want things to be better. They just want things to be different. And I don't think they set out to cause trouble. But here is my feeling about that word troublesome, because I do think it is, um, I think it's a, my next choice of word maybe would have been pot stirrer, but troublesome just sounds cooler. And when women start wanting to make choices for themselves and to put themselves on like the agenda, it causes inconvenience for other people, to which I say, oh, well, like, suck it up. And so, when anytime there's change, people don't like change, particularly the people who feel they're being affected by that change rather than choosing it. So that was kind of my sense of it. That's such a long answer, and I didn't go on quite so long, but I hope you get where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. All right. The next question is about female friendship, which obviously resonates with us. The reason we have book clubs is to connect with one another. And obviously, in the novel, the novel celebrated women banding together and often in unconventional ways. What do you think book clubs in real life can offer women beyond just reading?
Oh, connection. I mean, I think we are all over the world desperate for connection.
Mhm.
Um, and some of that can be, um, technology can allow for some of it, but I also think face-to-face connection is really, really valuable. And I think women in particularly value that so deeply, that sense of being heard, being seen. And also, too, I think book clubs in particular are especially value for a different kind of connection.
Mhm.
Um, Women by and large are not, we're not, or at least my generation, I think things are changing for younger generations, but we haven't barely been trained to like it's a good thing to have an opinion.
Mhm.
Like we're just supposed to get along with everybody, you know? And I
Yeah.
have to say, there are times in my family when I just want everybody to get along. I just, I just want there to be peace. And whatever it takes to make that happen, fine, I will make it happen. So we're not necessarily very good at disagreeing or expressing our opinions or feeling free that it's okay for us to think something that other people do not and to express that. And I think book clubs are the ideal situation for this because it really is a training ground for letting us have an opinion. The worst book clubs meetings in the world are when everybody loves the book. It's right? It's just so boring. Um, the better ones are like, I belong to a book club, and I love it when our book clubs, like half the people really liked the book and half maybe didn't. My very favorite book clubs are when I go in with an opinion about the book, and because of the connection and interaction I've had, I leave with a different opinion.
Yeah,
I
that happens a
love it
lot.
when someone changes my mind through
Hmm.
solid reasoning and argument and giving me insights that I did not possess when I came in the room.
Yeah, that's a good point. That happens all the time.
Right?
Rita's got a great question here. She says, was there a character you initially wrote very differently, but who surprised you and took on a new direction as the story developed?
Walt. Walt. Yeah. So Margaret's husband. And it wasn't that so much that he became different. It's just that initially he sort of wasn't there. Really, none of the men were. In my initial concept, did you ever see that movie? I like the original one that was like 1930, whatever the heck it is. And then they did a remake, The Women. So it was based on a play. Who wrote that play? I'm going to say Edna Ferber, but I'm probably wrong. Um, and which there was this whole play, and there were no men on stage ever. It was an entirely female cast. And it was so fascinating. And when they first made this movie back in the 30s, I mean, like people were having arm wrestling fist fights over the maid's role. Everybody wanted to be in that movie, right? And so that was kind of my initial concept is yes, there'd be men, but I was going to have the men be sort of just more off stage. And it just sort of didn't work. And And so, and my agent was like, you got to bring in the husbands. And I'm like, no, no, no. And then the more I went, she's like, yeah, no, I got to bring in the husbands. It's part of the package. And so Walt initially is there to, some of his function is sort of be a catalyst for Margaret for making changes. But then initially he was just such a jerk. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, I mean, and he was, right? Like I've been married for 43 years. My husband is a lovely man, but not always.
Hmm.
Sometimes, as you may have noticed by my bookshelves right now, they're super empty. That's because we're in the process of moving. And I told my husband on Sunday we were going somewhere, and I said, so in the next few days, we're going to have a knockdown, drag out argument. And he said, we are? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, why? I'm like, we always do. And it won't be about anything except the fact that we're exhausted and at loose ends. So, and he's like, why do I have to know this? I'm like, just so you're prepared and you don't think it's you. So, because that's just life. That's just the way things are. So he's really being a jerk, but he's not a jerk. He's just being a jerk, right? And so, and I wanted to write a marriage as I got it. I wanted to write a marriage that felt really real.
Yeah.
Because he is an essentially decent guy. He's just having a really crappy couple of years, you
Yeah.
know? And especially one thing, so I grew up in an all-female household. And so when I got married, I didn't really know much about like men as a
Right.
group. I mean, there were times I'd call up my mom and I'm like, he walks around in just like his underwear. And she's like, oh, they all do that. And I'm like, why? I bought him a robe. But she's like, they just do that. And I was like, he should wear the robe. But she's like, he's not going to. You just are going to have to get used to that. And I have, right? So, there was a lot of things. And so some of my earlier books, I really wasn't very good at writing men at all because I didn't understand them particularly well. I mean, I adored my husband, but I didn't understand him, right? And so finally I realized I have to get, oh, Claire Booth Luce, thank you, wrote the women. I knew I wasn't Edna Ferber. It was she wrote Giant. Anyway, um, so I finally was like, I got to get better at writing men. So I sort of sat down and interviewed my husband. And I was like, so what's it like to be you? What is this? What is your world like? And one of the things that stuck with me, and this was a long time ago, was the weight of responsibility he felt for the
Mhm.
finances of our family. He just, it weighed on him. And I thought, wow, that's a lot to have to carry. And how much worse was it back in the day when there was no like it really was all on Walt, right? Like every sink
Yeah.
or swim, it was his fault. And so he was trapped too. And as I started to think about that. And so that became a way to make Walt human, you know. Because I don't think this very, very, strict rules about this gender has to do this and this gender has to do that, and that's the way it is. I don't like it's a trap for everybody.
Yeah. And Walt, I mean, like you said, he was having a few bad years, but also like he had to go against society to support his wife, really, because the role that was written for him was not who he ended up being.
Right. And a lot of men, if you go back and read this stuff, you'll be like, oh, but it's true. A lot of men back then, if their wife was working, it was like, well, you are failing.
Yeah.
If your wife has to work, you're not a good provider. You're a
Right.
bad guy. So they found it embarrassing, you know. And so I mean, when Walt just belittles her and calls her a jobette, what a horrible sting that was for her. But he's feeling embarrassed and he's feeling defensive. And
Yeah.
nobody is their best selves when they're crouched down in a defensive posture
For
emotionally.
sure. For sure. Um, Back to the characters, was there one specific character that you really enjoyed writing?
I really loved all of them, but come on, Charlotte is a lot of fun to write. She just she does the things you're not supposed to do. She says the things you're not supposed to say. She gives the appearance of not giving a rat's rear end, but of course she does. Um, but she was just a blast to write. They're really all worth. I'm a writer who, and I know this will sound strange to civilians, but there are some writers who really kind of hate writing in some sense, and I am often that writer. It's really difficult for me, and I put myself under a lot of stress, and it can cause a great deal of anxiety. And this book wasn't like that. And I
Mm.
think I just loved the characters so much. I couldn't wait to get to my desk and hang out with them and just, to listen to them talk. And I love the dialogue between them. And it was evident in even the early manuscripts when I sent it off to my agent and my editor. They were like, "We love it. We want more scenes with the women all together in the same room."
Okay. Now, I know this book, as you wrote in your author notes, was really important for you to write. And is that because after reading it, you wanted the reader to sort of leave with having learned something or an important theme, or what did you want to get across to the reader?
Gosh, there's a lot of things that I think are important in this book. So, but for me, I would say the biggest one is just talking about. So, Margaret, remember her essay that
Hmm.
she writes for the
For
paper.
the
And
paper,
and
yeah.
for me, something she says there is, as far as I'm concerned, the whole meaning of the book. Like you can
Mm.
wrap it up right there. And that is where she says there are countless good and right ways to be a woman and only two wrong. The first is to assume that your way is the way, the only way. And the second is to buy into that nonsense and spend the rest of your life limping down an aimless road in shoes that will never fit. And I think even today, a lot of women feel like they're being forced to play a role that doesn't quite suit them.
Hmm.
And so, like, there's a lot of ways to do this that are okay, and to organize your family in ways that are okay for you. And it doesn't have to suit everybody else, and that's all right.
Yeah, it's as relevant today as it was then for sure. Mhm. The role of books in the story, books bring women together. Was there a specific book in your life that built community for you the way the fictional book club builds it for the characters?
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know that I can point to a specific book. No. I just think, I've been a member of a book club of some sort or other. I've moved a lot. Again, empty shelves, many
Mhm.
times. And so one of the first things I usually do when I get to a new community is I find a book club. And that's usually where I find my friends. My most central relationships are going to be through my book club because book people are interesting people. They have something to talk about besides what is on sale at Target, you know? So, so I love that. So yeah, I can't point to one specifically that I can think about.
Well, we agree with you in that statement for sure. Book people are interesting people.
It's true.
What kind of research did you end up doing for this book, and how did you do it?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of so it took a long time. First thing was, as I said, reading The Feminine Mystique, like reading it a couple of times, and then trying to figure out, okay, now I've read this, but if I was a woman back then, like how am I responding to it? And there was a book that I don't think it's even in print now, but I thought it was so fascinating, and it was called A Strange Stirring, and it's by Stephanie, well, it's gone. Her first name's Stephanie. And she talked about both the response, from the women who read it, like good and bad, and societal response to it. And that was really, really helpful to me because there were a lot. There we go. Stephanie Coons. Thank you. Yay, Erin. Um, it was so, so fascinating to be looking at what were women really saying and thinking in that moment. So, because I had my mom, but she's just one person. So that was really helpful. I also I was alive in 1963, but barely.
Right.
Um, so I really had to kind of go and kind of immerse myself in the 60s again. Like, what is going on in the world at that time? I wasn't, you know, things are starting to heat up in the civil rights movement and a little bit in Vietnam and all kinds of things. So there were those places, sections in the book where I tried to give you just a brief, in this month, these things happen, boom, 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 just to give you context
Yeah.
about how the world is really changing, and it sort of hadn't for a long time. And so that was a lot and yet at the same time, the bulk of Margaret's world is the home and hearth, and yet things are happening, and opening her mind to this one book is helping open the women's mind to the wider world around them, which I think was really important. So I had to understand that a little better. Um, and then I got to do fun things like I bought vintage magazines, as many as I could get my hands on and afford, because some of them are stupid expensive. But I
Uh-huh.
loved like going through the actual physical copies of the magazines, which smelled like moldy ink and dust. And I love that smell, right? Like your grandma's basement who used to save all her National Geographics kind of a thing. And so that was fun because I wanted to understand like women's magazines. It soon became apparent to me, and I kind of remembered it, how influential physical magazines were, particularly for homemakers. And I grew up in a world where there were magazines. I mean, one of my favorite things, McCall's magazine used to have paper dolls. They
Mhm.
had Betsy McCall, and she was this fictional character. And every month you could cut out new outfits for your Betsy McCall paper dolls. So, like, it was something people looked forward to. I looked forward, the new recipe, and something that was sort of probably in a lot of homes, it was kind of what was in the magazine was sort of, water cooler talk too among homemakers. But there was also, they were really super sexist, and they were really selling women on this idea that this is the ideal. This is how you should be treating your husbands, and you should be raising your kids, and you should be cooking this. And my mom was helpful with some of that too, because she would talk about how even then she would get so frustrated that next to an article about how you should lose weight and all the ways to do that, there'd be an advertisement that had a recipe for like potato chip pie. And she was like, the disconnect didn't feel right to her even back then. So that was something I spent a lot of time in. And then once I decided, I had Concordia, where did I want to put it? And having the idea that there was this very sort of Pleasantville town, not very far from Washington, D.C., where things are changing, brought up a whole new possibility when I sort of realized, well, my women are going to help each other, but they really need somebody else. They need somebody who has a little more power and a little more influence and a little more opportunity. Who is that going to be? And I thought about Katharine Graham. And so I knew about Katharine Graham, but I did more research into her. And I realized she's really just the perfect person. So then once I decided, you know what? I could actually bring Katharine Graham into this book and the story in a way that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then I started playing, well, who else could I have walk through, So it's kind of fun from that. It was fun for me to write those people in, and I know it's been really fun for readers to like say, "Oh my gosh, Helen Thomas, I used to watch and she was always in the front row in the presidential press conferences and things like that." So all of those, I read more books about Katharine Graham, and then I read a book about Jackie Kennedy, which I
Yeah.
highly recommend, called Camera Girl. And because I kind of remembered, but I didn't really remember that she had really very much wanted to have a career in journalism before she married Jack and before she became the first lady. And so that's a really fascinating book that just opened up my eyes to a side of her personality that I had not known about. So highly recommend that one too if you like nonfiction.
Awesome. Joanne has a question here. Joanne, I'm not sure I completely understand this. What characters are you hanging with in your next project? And will it be historical fiction,
Fiction,
maybe? Fiction?
fiction.
Yeah.
And have I watched?
Sorry, that's my eyesight going.
That's okay.
Trying to type. Um, it, you had commented that you loved hanging with these characters.
Yeah.
So going forward, when you hang with characters, if you find a character you don't really like hanging with, are you going to drop it?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
probably.
yeah,
No,
and
no.
then
I mean, these ones I've felt a particular intimacy with, but if I don't like the character, unless it's the villain, you need a villain sometimes, right?
yeah,
Howard was the villain. You got to have somebody you love to hate. That's important in fiction. Um, but no, if I don't like the characters, I don't want to spend a year of my life and more with them. So, and why would my readers want to spend time with them? Doesn't mean that my characters can't be flawed. And in fact, they're way more interesting if they have flaws. But we have to understand, like Walt, right? Very flawed guy that so many people were so mad at. But by the end of the book, we understand where these flaws come from and that there's a decent person underneath that. So, does that answer your question?
absolutely. And your next project then, will it be
Ah,
historical fiction and research based? And
it
what
it
kind of
will be.
characters are you hanging with?
Well, I'm not hanging with the characters yet. I have characters in my mind, and I have, in fact, just finished sending an outline to my agent, and we'll see what she has to say. Hopefully, she likes the direction I'm going. So I kind of have the characters in my mind, but I don't have them cemented because I haven't, I sort of write my way into characters. The more I write them, the better I know them, even though I do extensive outlining. This will be and has been so far a very research-based book. And it is also historical fiction. And that's all if I talk about books too much at this point, I find that it sort of takes the juice out of the idea for me. So I don't talk about it very much.
Sorry, Marie, is there a book between the book club for Troublesome Women and the one you're talking about now?
There is not. No.
No, okay.
So this is just I've just gotten the outline going. So you probably won't see another book from me until I would say April or May of 27.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
And now that we're on the topic of sort of like what's coming next, what about what came before? Is there a specific book that you'd like to highlight or tell us a little bit about? Just so, I mean, we find authors and then we get obsessed with them and we want to read everything they've ever written. So
And I
that
and I
is
support that. I think you should just read everything I've ever written. I've written so many books. It is hard. I do have a few that are just particularly favorites of mine, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna, every book speaks to people different ways. I wrote a book called The Restoration of Celia Fairchild a couple of
Mhm.
years ago. It's contemporary. It's set in Charleston, which I loved. It's got an ensemble cast of characters, which is kind of what I do uh, very often, and more as I've gotten older. And there was something tender and poignant and wonderful about that book and the community that she creates and the surprises that come her way. So I really liked that book a great deal. There's a book I wrote quite a few years ago that I am very proud of and that did okay, but I don't feel got the attention it deserved because I thought it was really good. And in fact, it was really wonderful. I don't save I don't save clippings anymore because I've been doing this a long time. I mean, it just gets to feel silly after a while to sit. But there was one, and I think it was in Oh, it was in Publishers Weekly about this book it's called The Promise Girls. And it's about three sisters who are failed child prodigies who had a very traumatic childhood. And they have grown up now, excuse me, they're failed child artistic prodigies. And now they've grown up and they are not creating art anymore. And so it's going back to like, how are they going to get that back? And their relationships back, and they have a very complicated mother, and I loved that book. So anyway, after I finished that, like 2 years after I finished that book, and it did fine, but it didn't, blow the doors off anything. Publishers Weekly wrote about it, a reviewer called Under the Radar Reads, and this reviewer said, I was supposed to read this book and I didn't, and oh my goodness, they're like, we love it when an underdog books this, like, it was an amazing book. And so that made me really happy, and I think it's a good one. So those are a couple of my favorites. I also wrote a book called The Second Sister that's older, and it's set in Wisconsin. I really enjoyed that one. Hallmark made a movie out of it, and I have to say it was a lot of fun to have a book of mine made into a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. However, the movie is called Christmas Everlasting. I didn't know I'd written a Christmas movie until Hallmark told me I had. I don't find it to be particularly Hallmarky because I was so confused. It was probably one of the darkest books I've ever written. And so I just didn't get it. And then I realized, oh, there is a love story element in the book, but it's not, sometimes I have that, but it is not, unless I'm writing like a novella, it's not the most important dramatic question in the book by a long shot, but Hallmark just picked that. And they sort of did that. And, so I read this, and it was good. It was fun. I got to go to the set. I got to meet Patti LaBelle. It was great. And as my husband said to me, I mean, I got the script, and it was like, oh, well, they left out a lot and changed a lot. And he looked at me, he said, baby, the check cleared. And I was like, yes, yes. So, making a living as an artist isn't easy. So the check clearing is all good news. And it was fun. It was a fun experience. But that book is a really worthwhile book to read.
Awesome. That's super helpful. On that subject, because I just had a look at your Goodreads page, I wonder, do you read your reviews?
A little bit sometimes when it's first coming out, but then I just don't.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I wrote what I wrote.
Right.
And the wonderful part about having written this many books is that you just finally realize, like every book if somebody reads my book and they hate it, I'm just like, it wasn't their cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. You're not going to write a book that makes everybody happy. I remember years ago, there was a young debut author who wrote me an email, and she was just beside herself because somebody had given her a 1-star review.
Right.
And it was like, this is going to happen. It's okay. And she was just like, she was just going on a nutty off of this, right? And I was like, who is one of your very favorite authors that you think is like genius? And I think she was, I can't remember. I'm so bad with author names. I should be better. The Kite Runner, right?
Mm.
And I was like, go to that Goodreads
Khaled
page.
Hosseini,
Guarantee you there are some 1-star reviews. It's okay. It's okay. So yeah, obviously I prefer it when the star rating is up, because unfortunately I think people, well, for good or for bad, people do use those to decide. And there are some books that I've absolutely loved that were like significantly less than 4 stars.
The reason I asked you is because you're like, it's unusual to see an author with so many at 4 or just near 4. So many books. You're a very consistent author.
I think I am pretty consistent.
Yeah.
There's one book, and I won't tell you which one, that I really felt I was not at the top of my game. But I was going through a real personal crisis at that time. And, I turned it in. And there was some question about whether or not I would. So I did my job. I was a professional, and I did the best I could at that moment in my life. And that's all anybody can do, right?
For sure.
But yeah, I take my works pretty seriously, and I go through about 7 or 8 drafts. I really do want it to be a good book.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. In closing, I was hoping you could answer the question that if you have any advice for aspiring authors, having done this for so long and written so much, I know that there are, I mean, the industry is so huge these days, and everybody wants to write a book, it seems. So I was wondering if you have any advice.
I think there's like some quote from Aristotle or something, some like really ancient name that says, times are hard, children no longer obey their parents, and everyone is writing a book. So,
Could be no
um,
further from the truth.
well, so I honestly, the best piece of advice I could ever give any author, and I think that's why I really took that to heart with this particular book more than I ever had years ago. Robin Carr, who wrote the Virgin River series and Sullivan's Crossing and so many other books. I've known Robin for a long time, but before I kind of knew Robin, I mean, I sort of knew her. Now we're closer. Um, I went and listened to her give a keynote speech, and she said, take pleasure from the process because the process is the only thing you have any control over.
It's good.
I really, if you looked at my Goodreads, you'll note I'm not writing as fast as I used to. I
Mhm.
used to write a book a year at least, and it was just killing me. It was not fun. Like it was just my life was a deadline. I missed a lot of things, including time with the people I love. And I was like, this is not sustainable. And so now I write a book every couple of years,
Mhm.
and I purposely try to take joy in the process because I can't control what those Goodreads things are. I can't control the fact that somebody will not find my book their cup of tea. And by the way, as much as so, if you're an aspiring author, you can't necessarily control whether or not your work is going to get published. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just a hard reality. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't try. You absolutely should. And I do think something that I hear from aspiring writers too often is they quickly jump to self-publication. They get a couple rejections and that feels horrible. And then and self-publication may be a good option, but don't do it just because you hate being rejected by tradition. I mean, I got rejected a zillion times. That's just part of the deal. So don't give up on that path too soon. Um, but make sure if you're going to invest this much of your heart and your soul and your time into writing a book, like enjoy it.
Mhm.
And even if it never sees the light of traditional publishing daylight, nobody can take that part away from you. That's
Yeah.
yours. So once again, not good at the short answers. This is why I don't do televisions.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to your next book, even though we have to sit tight for a little while. And Joanne,
Oh, can I tell you another book that I'm just like a huge evangelist for that's
please
not.
do.
Oh, I loved this book so much. I want everyone in the whole world to read it. It's called The Sideways Life of Denny Voss,
Okay.
Voss. It's by a woman named Holly Kennedy. I it's funny, it's poignant, it's meaningful, it's exactly what I needed. Um, just a delightful book. So if you're looking for just I'm looking for books that bring me joy in a difficult time when things feel very uncertain, and this book did that for me. So I hope you guys get the
Awesome.
chance to read that too.
Awesome. Maybe we'll get it into a vote if possible. Looks great.
It's great. So thanks so much. Really enjoyed visiting with all of you. And Erin, I'm just like envious of your exotic lifestyle, I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight.
All
Take
right, guys.
care.
Bye-bye.